reading for pleasure or have the sort of luxury to include all of those sorts of things. So, right, the Odyssey's like this. All ancient literature that's written is like this. And it makes it really hard to read for a modern reader. But it does require then paying more attention, reading between the lines. Okay, so here's a great, this is another just kind of pet peeve of mine. This is really a hermeneutical or an isogogical kind of, that is to say, how we interpret the Bible, how to read the Bible with understanding, kind of deliberately. And one of the problems we have when it comes to reading the Bible is that we have this sort of tendency to go into a different mode than we would with normal speech. So in fact, this came up a little bit yesterday when I talked about indirect speech. And I told you that at the Garden of Gethsemane, that's indirect speech, right? So that would have been very obvious, I think, in context if you had been there. But my guess is that many of you had not thought about the Garden of Gethsemane in that way before. And my guess would be, just based on my pastoral experience, that some of you would probably have been troubled by Jesus saying that because it sounds like he's asking to get out of it, right, on the surface. I don't know, maybe some of you never thought that, but, right, so that kind of idea, right, the only reason we think that is because we are reading the Bible differently than we would read, say, a novel. If you were reading a novel, you would sort of know that these are real living people and that there's nuance and context to this that is natural. But when it comes to the Bible, we're often afraid to bring that same sort of imagination to bear. And we need to get over that. We need to be careful with this imagination. It needs to be a sanctified, trained imagination by the Word of God, but we need to actually bring it to bear so that we read deeply. The Bible actually requires you to fill in the blanks and read between the lines. So the indirect speech thing is a great example, but I'll give you another one that I know you've always done, probably automatically without ever realizing it. And that is, how roughly, right, how old do you think Simeon was, roughly, when he sang the Nunc Dimittis in the temple? And then how quickly afterwards do you think it was before he died? What's your sense? Do you think Simeon was 20 years old, 18? Older, 80? Do you think that he lived a long time afterwards, or do you think he died pretty quick afterwards? Not too long, yeah. The Bible doesn't say any of that, right? So the Bible doesn't actually give us any clues. I mean, no explicit, it gives us clues. It doesn't give us any explicit language. It just says that Simeon had been told that he would not die before he sees the Lord's Messiah. That's all it says. And then he says, Lord, now, right, let me depart in peace. He could have lived another 100 years for all we know, right? But the story doesn't really set you up that way, right? The story implies, you're exactly right, your sense is totally right. It implies that Simeon has been waiting a long time. I mean, the story sort of needs him to wait a long time to be this personification of Israel, right? The one who's been waiting and longing for this, right? He needs to be old. And then, when he sees the Messiah, he needs to die. I mean, really, to walk out the temple and fall dead on the temple stairs would be kind of perfect. And I think that is the implication. You are actually reading between the lines to get there. And that's not wrong. So sometimes, again, it comes from a great place. Like we have such reverence for the Word of God, and we want to pay very close attention to all the details. And we don't want to sort of just make up stuff wildly from our imagination. And so we sometimes call that speculation. Oh, you're just speculating. That's a pejorative term in Lutheranism. You don't want to be speculating. We want to go by the Bible. Well, that's fair to some degree, but at the same time, it's not merely speculation. It's actually paying attention to the tone, to the words, to the context, to the history of Israel, when you think that Simeon was old. If you were dogmatic about it, if you were like, here are the, we're going to put this in the Apostles' Creed, that Simeon was at least 80 years old. Now you're going beyond Scripture and you're being dogmatic about things that Scripture doesn't say, and you shouldn't do that. Does that make sense? So we should be careful. We should know what the Bible actually says. But that is not to say that we shouldn't engage our imaginations and read more deeply. And sometimes we don't read as deeply as we should because we get into, one of the problems is reverence. We're afraid of sort of engaging our imaginations the way we would if we were reading something else, and then we miss things that the Bible expects us, again, to fill in these blanks. And especially because it's a different kind of, it's not a different kind of literature, but it was written in a different time and a different era where they didn't fill in the blanks. They required more of the reader. So we have to fill those in. And then the other sort of problem that gets in the way of biblical interpretation for us is actually Sunday school. And I'm a big fan of Sunday school. Glad we have Sunday school. But there is sort of the problem, and I'm sure you've all run into this, that you get a picture in your head, and then the problem is that you've heard this story so many times that you don't actually listen carefully. Right? You already know the story. I can give you lots of examples of this, but my favorite one of this is the Good Shepherd, because we all love that and we all know it so well. And I even say Good Shepherd. Now I'm thinking John 10 here, right? And when you think of what would be the way to draw a picture or paint a painting of the Good Shepherd, what would it probably look like? Jesus with the sheep on his shoulders. But what does Jesus actually say in John 10? He doesn't say, I am the good shepherd. So we're thinking of the lost sheep, right? We're thinking of the parable of the lost sheep when we picture Jesus with the sheep on his shoulders. But in John 10, that's a different context. But what does he say? What? No. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Wait a minute, that's different than carrying a sheep. That's a description of the cross. Right? If we're really, but we hear good shepherd and we just jump to the stained glass window, right? Or the Sunday school drawing. That's where we jump to. It's not a bad place, right? I don't mean that we shouldn't bring that to bear, right? But if we actually pay attention to the words, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. That is actually a shocking statement. Because let's just think about that for a second. Is that the normal procedure of shepherds? No, of course not. Right? A good shepherd is not a shepherd that dies for a sheep. That's a lunatic shepherd. If I said he's a good rancher, the good rancher dies for his cows. What? Ranchers don't die for cows. Cows die for ranchers. Sheep die for shepherds. Sheep are raised for wool and for meat and for profit. And when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, I am not like regular shepherds, right? This is the economy of heaven. He's trying to shock us in some sense. Does that make sense? It's a shocking statement, a surprise statement, and it washes right over us because of Sunday school. Yes, right?
There's recently seen a picture, and Jesus is the shepherd, and there are wolves on his back. There you go.
Yeah. There you go. Quite a different, yeah. So, and again, I'm not condemned. Actually, our church in Fort Wayne has a good shepherd window at the total. Exactly what you pictured. Jesus, shepherd on his sheep on his, just a standard pastoral scene. So I'm not against that. It's not wrong. But there is a certain sense in which that picture can prevent us from hearing the text. Does that make sense? And in both cases, right, both of those things, of course, the real call is to just read carefully, read deeply, right, meditatively. So I was going to start in a different place today, but since we jumped into that, I don't know how we got that. Is this because of the words of the steward to the bridegroom, and how they kind of. I understand how it can sound like a compliment, but I think the reason it sounds like a compliment is because it's Sunday school again. Because it's sort of like we are impressed that, in fact, I can remember hearing sermons about this, or at least the pastor talk about this. I remember listening to either a sermon or in some context, I think it was a sermon, but I was a kid, and I remember him talking about, boy, wouldn't it have been great to have tasted that wine? That must have been that wasn't just good wine, that was the best wine the world's ever had. There's never been wine so delicious. He kind of went on about that. I believed it at the time, but now I'm like, I don't know if it was the best wine the world's ever had. And I don't think that it was a compliment. But anyway, so one of the things I wanted to do in this that I think is related here with reading and meditation, contemplation, is what the world has now been calling mindfulness. And I'm sort of hesitant to use that language even, because all of these words are sort of corrupted by the world. But there is this great correspondence, I think, actually with wine tasting. And I'm not, don't tell Pastor Anthony, but I'm not really a wine guy. But I have been on a number of wine tastings, and it is kind of amazing. Everybody been to a wine tasting? Yeah, great. No? Well, you probably, I actually, for some reason, I thought there was going to be wine tasting at this week. I don't know if I think it was just from talking to Pastor Anthony. This whole thing was being planned years ago. But anyway, the great thing about when you're at the wine tasting, what do they make you do? Right, cleanse your palate, stop, take a breath, right, concentrate, take a sip. Don't swallow it, right? Savor it, right? Think about it deliberately, right? Then swallow it, pause, think about it again. Try to put words to what you experience. Now, it can get we all make fun of them, because whatever the things that they're sort of tasting and smelling and thinking about and all of this. But it does work. Right? If you've done this, I would be surprised if you're not like, oh, now take it out. Then what do they call these fancy wine guys? Like your dad's going, sommelier. It's too fancy of a word for me. Sommelier. That's a Minnesota thing. Mostly Minnesota. Sommelier. Okay, the wine guy, right? Who's explaining, right? Then when he says, "Oh, do you notice raspberries on the front and pepper on the end and vegetal overtones?" and then you try it again. You're like, "Oh." Sometimes you can't. So not always, but right. Actually, her putting words to it actually opens up your senses and your awareness of it. It's real. It does happen. And I think that it's actually a great example of what contemplation is. So I like the word contemplation. I don't like the word meditation, because all of these words have problems, so maybe they're worth repeating. The word meditation just kind of rings weird in my ears because of Eastern mysticism. So I'm worried about sort of yoga people or whatever, just doing weird stuff. But whatever. Mindfulness also seems to have a kind of new agey sort of thing that just seems like it's corrupted. Contemplation, maybe that's no better. I doubt Luther would like the word because Aristotle uses it. But it is the word that Aquinas uses, which probably wouldn't impress Luther either. But anyway, contemplation being this idea that we would actually savor God's word, sort of like wine tasting, that we would slow down, we would pause, we'd take a breath, we'd let it wash over us, we'd read it, we'd stop, we'd think about it, we would try to summarize it, right? Sort of like describing what's going on here. Go back, read it again, right? To actually take our time and to have these details with it. And that bears great fruit. I haven't done this for a while in my Bible class, but a lot of times in adult Bible class, we would read like a narrative, like let's say the John 2 thing. And then I would give me the 5 W's, like I was teaching, 8th grade English. Who, what, where, when, why. Can you repeat back to me what this was, right? And it's amazing how they would have to. They could, of course, but it would take them. They couldn't do it immediately. It wasn't instinctual. It wasn't immediate. It required. Oh, I got to think now, because you were reading from John 2, and I already knew the story. I wasn't paying that close of attention. So now I got to remember. Oh yeah, where was it? What happened? Who was there? Right? It's hugely helpful to actually understand what's happening. I mean, it's obvious in a way. Another thing that I like to do, especially with high school kids, is I will tell them, pretend that you are the director of a play. You know, John 2, this is the scene, and you are the director, and you've got to tell the actors, right? First of all, you've got to figure out how many actors do you need. So let's just do John 2. It's not that hard, right? Who are the characters? Who's there?
The wedding feast, or the wedding guests.
The wedding guests, all right? Jesus,
Disciples.
the disciples, his mother, the bridegroom, the master of ceremonies. I think we got everybody but one group. Servants. I think that's probably everybody. Right? So all of a sudden it's like just even doing that, like, oh, there are a lot of characters. We need a lot of actors for this, right? And then, so now we've got our characters, right? And their lines are given to them. We know what they're going to say, right? So now I like to say to the kids, all right, I want you to tell me you're going to tell the servants how to say their lines or how to act. And they don't have any speaking part, but, right? So what are they feeling? What is the emotional reality or the characteristics of the servants? This is crazy? Yeah.
They're dutiful.
Dutiful? What? Wonder when it happens, yeah. Maybe at first, like, this is stupid, why are we putting water in here, right? But you see how when you start to have to direct the play, it forces you to think about this. And sometimes, I'm not saying it all bears fruit, right? I don't know that there's a lot of exegetical fruit from the emotional character of the servants in this, but you don't really know till you go through it, right? And so when you start going through it in that way, right, now we've talked a lot about the master of ceremonies, but now you kind of, well, what's the master of the ceremonies thinking, right? And how is he feeling? Right? And that helps you read the thing kind of again, sort of read between the lines. Does that make sense? It's a good exercise in my estimation, and I've seen it bear fruit for myself personally. I do this with the kids to help them, because it's hard for kids. Reading comprehension is terribly low, and it helps them summarize. So I want the children to be able to repeat back what the story was and what its essence was. I want them to be able to summarize things, and that is a very difficult skill. It shouldn't be, it doesn't seem, but it is. So that's what we use it for. But I also I just use it for myself. I'm trying to write a sermon on parable or the miracle of Cana. I would just do this as a way to try to get past this sort of Sunday school block where I just see that picture. And I find it bears fruit. So there's more to it, though, than that. I want to take this just a little bit further. So obviously, kind of our ultimate goal is to read the Bible more deeply, more thoroughly, right, so that we can receive the benefits of it. And go to Deuteronomy chapter 6. This is one of my favorite sections of Scripture. This is called in Hebrew the Shema. I don't know if any of you knew that, because I can't talk by Deuteronomy at the same time. Okay, well, this is a nice Bible, by the way. What is this?
It's NKJV. NKJV.
Okay, nice. All right, so Deuteronomy 6, you start in verse 4. It's called the Shema because the first word in Hebrew here is the word Shema. And this was actually a creed in the Old Testament. They said this, they spoke this verse out loud every day, every morning and evening. That's why it's just called the Shema. Sort of like we might call something the Our Father. But we don't do that a lot in Lutheranism. You've probably heard that before. Liturgically, things take their names from the first word of the section, usually in Latin. So the Agnus Dei, right, is the Lamb of God, right, which takes place part of the communion liturgy, right? The Gloria in Excelsis, right? These are just so it's just the first words. That's the way that they're described. The one that's goofed, there's a couple of them that are goofed up on this. One of them is the Kyrie, because Kyrie is not Latin, it's Greek. This is an annoyance. Sorry, American Lutherans. This is the dumbest thing. Probably none of you know this. Only American Lutherans sing the Kyrie in the vernacular. That is to say, we sing the Kyrie on Sunday mornings, right? We sing, Lord, have mercy, Christ, have mercy, Lord, have mercy. Lord is Kyrie is Greek for Lord. And in the Latin Mass, the Kyrie was sung in Greek. That's why it's called the Kyrie, not the Dominus. And in German, the Kyrie is sung in Greek. And in Spanish, it's sung in Greek. And in the Greek Orthodox Church, it's sung in Greek. But also in the Russian. Everybody sings it in Greek. And for some unknown, unfathomable reason, in American Lutheranism, way early on, in the 1800s, they decided to translate it. So we were the only ones who sing it in our own language. I hate that. I don't like that at all. I mean, I shouldn't say hate it. I shouldn't say hate anything. But it's an annoyance. Anyway, so the Shema, that's this Hebrew word hear, right? Hear, O Israel. So here it reads, verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. So this is what they say. Now there's a bunch of fun stuff in here. First of all, hear. This is just great. Faith cometh by hearing. Right? And so we have to be constantly called back to hearing the Word of God, being defined by the Word of God. And then what do they hear? They hear this creedal reality. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. And this is so great because now you see this, if you're looking at your English, you're familiar with this, where the word Lord is written in all capital letters. Right? It's actually hard to see unless you concentrate on it because we just read it. But like you can see, the R is a capital R, not a lowercase r, right? And that, of course, you remember, indicates what? Yahweh, right? So this is the name that God gave to Moses from the burning bush. The Lord, the one who is, right? The one who is, this name of power and uniqueness, right? Particularly against Pharaoh, but of course against all of the ancient world. The chief dogmatic concern in the Old Testament is monotheism. There's only one God, and it's hugely offensive because the ancient world is a polytheistic culture without exception, really. And the great thing about polytheism, there's always room for one more. Polytheism is always inclusive. You show up in Egypt and you got a god, great, add him to the list. No problem. They always are willing. And it's hugely obnoxious when the Hebrews are like, oh, no, your gods are all fake. We have the only real one. You're all deluded. Only our God is real. That's very offensive. It's offensive in Egypt. It's offensive in Rome. It's offensive in Persia. Nobody likes it. It seems very obnoxious. Does it sound at all familiar to Minnesota these days? Coexist. I mean, it really is the same thing. And so wherever they go, they're running into this. And it's a very awkward and painful thing. Because these people are like being nice to them. Hey, come on in, we like you. Let's worship our God. You can worship your God. This is great. You see this really illustrated beautifully with Jonah on the boat. Remember? Because they say, what are they doing? They know somebody's mad. They're trying to figure out which God to appease. This is like, they're a bit like the Roman Catholics trying to find the right saint to pray to. I lost my keys, who's going to help me? I need to sell my house, which saint do I pray to? What, right? They didn't, this isn't, that idea, the cult of the saints, didn't come out of nothing. Anyway, that's what the sailors are trying to do. They're trying to figure out, they're totally willing to sacrifice to Jonah's God. Right? Yeah, we'll try anything. Right? You see this in Areopagus with Paul. Right? Oh, you got the unknown. And he kind of uses it. Right? Oh, you got that God over there, the unknown God. Well, they got the unknown God. That's a desperation on their part. They're just trying to cover all their bases, and he just sort of uses it as a polemical trick. He's not saying what they were doing was okay, right? But he's using it as a hook. So this monotheism is obnoxious. And another thing I always love to point out, you know what the word hallelujah means, right? That's a transliterated word. We talked about that yesterday. Hallelujah is a Hebrew word. It means what? Praise Yahweh. But more precisely, it means, or praise the Lord, right? But praise Yahweh, absolutely, that's the Yah at the end, hallelujah. But halla doesn't mean praise. It means boast. It's actually a very obnoxious word. It is not, they're not just running around saying God is great. They're actually saying Yahweh, right, which is the one who is, right? Boast in the one who is. Boast in him, right? Not just praising him, you're boasting. And again, this is in your face, Pharaoh, right? In your face, Nebuchadnezzar. In your face, Caesar Augustus, right? God will have them in derision. And this boasting, this monotheism, I think we can hardly overstate how difficult it is for the Christians of the Old Testament to live in that world. And to be forced into this, I mean, by God, right, for their own good, to this boasting, this praying, this exclusive claim. I am the Lord your God, you shall have no others. Right? I am a jealous God. There's an awkwardness in it, and it's costly to them, and many times. So that's the first part. The second part of this is even better. You thought that was good? In Hebrew, the word God is plural. It says, the Lord our gods is one. It's actually grammatically grating on the ear. So there's certain mistakes that native speakers make that come very naturally, that like in English we all make, or we make on occasion. Like the phone rings, and I pick it up, right? And they say, is Dave there? And I say, yeah, this is me, right? And that sounds right in English because we are used to the pronoun that comes after the verb being in the accusative or the objective case, right? So I wouldn't say this is I. It sounds wrong because it's after the verb. But it's actually, that would be right. Because the verb is has its own, or to be has kind of its own rules, and it takes the nominative or the subjective case on both sides, right? And so we will make that kind of mistake in English, even native speaker, right? What's that? Or yeah, that's the other one you hear all the time. This is she, right? Instead of this, we don't want to say this is she, which is what we should say. We want to say this is her. Right? This is her sounds better. It sounds better unless you're really into grammar. This is her sounds right, and this is she sounds wrong. Does that make sense? So that's one of those things that it can like. So my father was always like this was the thing. If you would say, how was this? We were never allowed to say like Tom and me. Right? Tom and me are going to the store. Okay, that's wrong. But then the problem was we had to always say Tom and I, even when we should have said Tom and me. Right? Who caught the ball? Right? And then I would have to say, if I said, Tom and I can't even do it. Caught the ball. Yeah, the ball was caught by Tom and me. Yeah. And so anyway, the point is there's these errors that we don't hear, right? And but there are then these errors that we would never make. And if somebody comes here and is learning English as a second language, we know right away. Does that make sense? That was the point of that whole story, right? So there are some things that we make, but there are other, like you would just no Native American speaker, Native American. I gotta watch what I say in Minnesota. No person born here who spoke English his whole life would say, for example, I are a good man. Right? You just wouldn't have that kind of subject-verb disagreement. It just sounds so wrong. It doesn't sound natural. That's the kind of disagreement that this is. This is an absolute grading thing. Right? The Lord our gods is one. And so they have to say this every morning and every night. The Lord our gods is one. And we're not allowed to have more than one God. And of course, what they're confessing here is the plurality within the unity. There are more proofs of the Holy Trinity in the Old Testament than the New Testament. Now that's really not that surprising, because it just turns out that the Old Testament has a lot more words than the New Testament. But really, what we're seeing here is this built-in constant reminder. So when finally the names of the persons of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, are given and revealed in their fullest form in Matthew chapter 28, when the church goes, oh yeah, Trinity is really like no leap of logic. It's not shocking or difficult. In fact, I am not familiar with any rabbinic literature, anti-Christian or like dialogues, where the rabbis complain about the doctrine of the Trinity. You hear that from like Muslims, and you sometimes have heard that from other like pagans that don't like it. But the idea of there being a plurality within the unity of the Godhead is very clear in the Old Testament. Here's one place, maybe the first place in a sense. But then, of course, you see this sort of threefold thing all the time also. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. Why three? Right? And then when the angels stand before, in Isaiah 6, holy, 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 right? And we've got this kind of threefold reinforcement again and again and again. This plurality within the unity that we know that is threefold. Oh, so eventually we make up the word Trinity when we're forced to kind of express this. So that's the beginning of it, the creedal statement. Here, right? Here, because faith cometh by hearing, we got one God, but our one God is more than one in some mysterious way. And you shall love the Lord your gods, also plural, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Well, what's missing? All your heart, all your soul, and all your strength, and all your mind. Where did that come from? I don't have the passage. I probably have it in the foot. It's Jesus misquotes this passage, and it is in. What verse number is this? Should I have this written down? Matthew 22:37. But keep your finger there to Deuteronomy 6. Matthew 22:37 reads, we'll go back to 34. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer. How many of you are lawyers? Oh, none? Yeah, this is a different kind of lawyer anyway. It's unfair that it's translated as a lawyer. He was an expert in the Bible. This should really be translated, honestly, Bible scholar. That's really what the lawyers were. They're Bible scholars. They're not lawyers like our lawyers. The lawyer asked him a question, testing him, and saying, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. The second is like it, you shall love your neighbor yourself. So Jesus, go back to Deuteronomy chapter 6. He has mind instead of strength or might. Right? It's a strange substitution in a way. Why? Go to the next lines in Deuteronomy 6. Verse 6. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So the word mind is not, I would translate that word in Matthew 22 as imagination. It is a compound word with the word mind. Dia, what's the word for mind? I think it is. Dia, not nomos, but it's close. It's dia. I don't have my Greek New Testament for me.
You see
Imagination. Imagination is what he's describing. It's a kind of thinking. So it's the word for thinking. That's why it's translated as mind. But because of this prefix, dia, that's put on the front of it. Dia, what did you say you thought it was? Dia, no? Logo. Oh, no. It's, I mean, I know a lot about this word, but it's not coming to me. I wrote my SDM thesis on this passage, but it's been quite a few years, and the Greek word's not coming to me. Anyway, it's the word that's used in the Magnificat. Shall scatter the proud in the imagination of their hearts. So it's that word. Anyway, it means thinking. At least it means thinking. I like the translation of imagination. That it's talking about the interior life, right? The intellectual life inside your brain that's going on all the time, right? What you're thinking about. Now, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, listen to this description. These words, which is the creed, the Lord our God is one, right? These words shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. And you shall talk of them when? When you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. Right? All the time. This is what is supposed to be engaging your mind all the time. What you're to be thinking about. Binding them as a sign on your hand, frontlets between your eyes, writing them on your doorpost. I think this passage actually is evidence, or at least support, for decorating your house as a Christian. Putting crucifixes on the wall, putting, whatever, Bible stuff on the wall, right? Making it known, not only as a reminder to yourself, that's the number one thing, but also as a public confession and witness, right? That this would be engaging. That's why I think Jesus uses this word mind instead of strength, because he's invoking verses 6 through 9. This is the nous. It's nous. Nous. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. But it's still not dia nous. Nous is just the word for mind. That's a noun. It's a verb.
Dianoia?
Dianoia. That's it. Dianoia. Yeah, I was trying to make it nomos, which is law. So never mind. Thank you. Yes.
Isn't Diana like one of the polytheistic gods?
Diana. Oh yeah, that'd be different though. Diana.
But that's provoking. Oh no, that was Artemis. That was wisdom.
Yeah, well maybe it is. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the word Diana means in Greek. I'd have to see it. Maybe it is from Diana. It doesn't seem like it is though. But it could be. Well, anyway, yeah. So this idea, I think really what we're seeing in Deuteronomy chapter 6 is contemplation. That's what's being described. That we're going to actually focus on this, we're going to meditate on this, we're going to continually work it over and over and over again, right? Through repetition, through deep learning. Does that make sense? And I think that this is the purpose of man. So I've been obsessed with this question for decades. And this is largely probably not influenced by the Bible. But I want to bring the Bible to bear. I love this question in Aristotle. So Aristotle is, well, all the Greek philosophers are interested. What is the excellence of man? Right? And you've heard some of this before, even if you didn't realize it was coming from Aristotle. Right? So Aristotle says, what is the excellence of an ant? So we would say, in English, I think what we would say is, what is the essence? What is the thing that makes an ant, that it's the best at, that its purpose is, that sets it apart from, elephants, right, and monkeys and people? What is the excellence of an ant? What do you think would be the answer? Yeah, right. So Aristotle says it's their organization, right? The fact that they cooperate together, that they're so they have this kind of, and in fact the Proverbs cite the ant that way too. They have no leader, but they get things done. What is the excellence of a cheetah? Speed, right? What is the excellence of... So he goes through this, right? And then, of course, we don't really care that much about ants and cheetahs. We care about ourselves. We want to know what we are. What is the excellence of a man? Now, there's a theological answer. If you get that, I would be very impressed. There's a theological answer. What makes human beings different than all the other creatures? And what would the answer be? Very good. Wow, you went right to it. The image of God is the... Now, most times when I ask this question, people will say, human beings have souls. Which is a good answer. It's not a false answer. But technically, you get the prize, because that is the kind of best, concise answer you can give. We were created in the image of God, and that is utterly distinct. And what that means is we have a soul. And it means some other things, right? But, so that was really, I'm impressed that you got that. Because I don't think that's the way most people's brains, I think most of you were probably going to say something like we have a soul. Yeah. But that's great. So the image of God, that's really the theological answer. But if we're not going to ask it in a purely theological way, we won't ask you, because maybe you can't separate yourselves from the theological answer. If you go over to the Wild Rice Festival and ask the man on the street, what's the thing that human beings are better at, or that makes them distinct from the animals, what do you think they would say? Very good. I think something, he said abstract thinking. I think usually something like reason, right? Abstract thinking, reason, that is the most common answer of what makes human beings different. I don't think that's a wrong answer either. I think it's true. But I would want to tie it to, again, actually the image of God, right? That God is a reasonable creature, and that's why we are. Now, here we'll really throw you out there. What do you think would happen if you asked an evolutionary biologist? If you ask an evolutionary biologist, what is it that has enabled human beings to be the dominant species on the planet? What has enabled them to, right? How are they different in a way that has allowed them? Nobody's probably has done any reading in this. Do you know? Do you guess? Yeah, but what is the thing that has evolved that makes us stand out? What's that? Human brain. Again, maybe they would say reason, but most of the time they don't.
Is it the thumb?
The thumb? Close.
Yeah.
Close. It turns out there's just a few things that there's lots of there is some critical thinking that they see in, whatever, like a tiger can, see, a gazelle run behind the tree, and he expects it's going to come out the other side, right, at the same speed. He can predict that sort of thing. But so they can engage in some sort of reasonable thinking. One of the things that we can do physically is we can throw stuff with great accuracy. So monkeys will throw stuff, as you know, famously, but they can't hit much with it. Human beings, even some of you that throw like girls, I see what I can do, right? Turns out throwing like a girl is way better than throwing like a chimpanzee. So human beings have there's nothing else that can do that. Now that actually does make some differences, right? Because there's a certain ability to then project power and violence, right? And this actually leads to things like a bow and arrow and guns and other things, right? Because we have this kind of ability to move beyond this. So but the accuracy of that. There's another thing that they'll say, which is fun. Human beings are really good at running long distances. And of course, so like you've probably seen this where human beings can outrun horses. Do you know this? Yeah, totally can. And do regularly, because horses can only run for so long and they get tired. And in the savannah in Africa, how they would hunt is by chasing these gazelles. And they would just keep chasing them. And the thing is they would run and the gazelle would sprint ahead, and then stop because it was tired, and the people would just keep running, and it would sprint ahead, and then it sprint ahead, and then it'd just be exhausted, and then they hit it in the head with the rock. So we actually, to have this kind of, and, so the first thing was to be able to run a long distance. The other thing is they could then carry it home. So even a lion can't run that far for a long time. But even if it could, it can't carry it home. So these are like the two things that they'll point out. Okay, they're just kind of interesting. There's no real theological point to that. I just enjoy talking about it. Sorry. Who created it? Well, this is the thing. Of course, the other thing that usually comes into this, which is related to the critical thinking thing. It's not just critical thinking or abstract thinking, but it's actually the ability to imagine. So the ability to go there, chase the gazelle down, to hit it in the head with a rock. Now what am I going to do? And then just sort of think of, right, a strategy to get the animal back to where the food can feed my children and so forth. So all of these things sort of come together. So we actually, some of these, and the same thing with the throwing, right? So the throwing, it's not just the ability to predict, I got to hit a moving target, I got to lead, but it's actually then being able to sort of see multiple things at once, which is imagination. Anyway, all of that's very interesting to me, but the right answer, of course, is the image of God. And then I think we have to start thinking about what I wanted to kind of bring this to was actually knowing about humanity and what we were created for actually shows us what God is like. Because we are his image. And we're not a perfect image of him, especially since the fall. But the thing is the things that we're actually good at and the things that distinguish us from the other creatures are indicative of who God is and what God is. And I think this imagination thing becomes very important. This was very important for both Tolkien and Lewis, right? And you've probably heard them talk about this whole idea of human beings engaging in sub-creation. You familiar with that? So their argument is, and I think they're right, God is a creative being, and therefore we were meant to be creative beings. Creativity is an exercise of imagination. Storytelling is an exercise of imagination. Memory is an exercise of imagination. Right? To put something in your brain, to hold something in your brain, to recall it in detail, all of this engages the imagination. And I think, actually, wine tasting requires imagination. To actually savor it, to think about it, to enjoy it, to recognize it, to pause, is actually, right, it's actually a mental activity that we were created to do, and that we're meant to do for fullness and for joy. And if all of this is informed by the Word of God, it is exponentially, I can't say that word, bigger, grows in amazing ways, right? And it does this. And we shouldn't limit it to wine tasting. I'm only picking on wine tasting because, of Anthony. But really, you can do this and should do this all day long. You should actually stop and just look at a tree and just realize that not every leaf on that tree is the same shade of green. Because the light is hitting them in different ways and reflecting in different ways, and it's moving, and all of a sudden, if you start counting the shades of green, if you were going to reproduce this exactly, you'd need a lot of crayons, right? And to realize how complicated it is, and to stop, and to pause, and focus, right? It's a restorative practice that is good for your soul if it is done as a prayer of thanksgiving and wonder at what God has done and is doing in the world. So the world would just call that mindfulness, right, or meditation or something, but they're onto something, and we should be able to do it and should do it, and we can do it better and with better results than they do because we actually know who gave these things. Right? So you can do this with color. It's amazing to do with color. And 1 minute of doing this, in fact, I'll tell you, you actually need to set a timer. Because 1 minute of looking at something feels way longer than you're used to. It's way longer than it feels. If you should do this with looking at art, don't just look at it. And try to just notice everything about it for 1 whole minute. Without talking, without thinking about other things, right? Just look at it and try to notice everything. If it's a piece of art, if it's looking, up at a tree, if it's looking at anything kind of nature, it's an amazing reality that is actually good for your neurological life, for your cognitive abilities, and for your soul. So food's a great way to do this. I actually kind of got into this, particularly with a barbecue potato chip. A barbecue potato chip is a great exercise. Close your eyes and put a single barbecue potato chip in your mouth and act like you're at a wine tasting. It's an incredibly complicated reality, right? Crunchy, salty, sweet. It's amazing the way. And we're just pounding them in mindlessly, right? Drinking wine mindlessly, not savoring it, not recognizing it, right? Walking out into the parking lot and walking right by a tree and not noticing it, or a flower, or whatever else, right? So all of these kinds of things. Sound is another one. So colors is a big one, I think, at least for me. Sound is another great thing. To just stop and just listen. And let's just do it. Just see. I haven't done it in here. There's probably sounds that we're just not even aware of. So let's just close our eyes and just listen for 30 seconds and see what we can identify. Okay. There's not a lot to hear in here. Did you hear anything? What'd you hear? Yeah, I get a coffee pot. A little bit of rustling, not much. We were pretty still, but I could hear just a teeny bit. Traffic. I heard some clicking. You think that was a coffee pot? Yeah. Yeah. So this was a pretty quiet space. There wasn't a lot, but I do this sometimes at lunch. I'm home alone at lunch, and I can just stand in the kitchen and close my eyes. And there's a lot of noises. It's a lot noisier than this, just in the hum of things and traffic and stuff. Birds I can hear from outside. It's kind of amazing, right? And it does just change your perspective a little bit. So sound is a good way to do. It's a good thing to do. Right? And anybody that teaches like music appreciation, what do they try to get you to do? Right? Stop and listen carefully. Anybody that teaches art appreciation, what do they try to get you to do? So I think this is actually built in. Oh, so back to the final thing when we wrap this up. It's been a whole hour, which I didn't intend. But I was going to do this later anyway. The other thing is, so I said this is the purpose of man. So the excellence of man is the image of God. What is his purpose? If you ask Aristotle, it's reason or wisdom, the ability to sort of overcome the passions with the brain. Not bad. If you ask Aquinas, he'll say that it's contemplation, to think about God, to think about God deeply. I think Aquinas is better than Aristotle. But I'm going to take it one step further in my mind. I think I want to correct, or not correct exactly, but I want to expand on Aquinas. I think the purpose of man is actually praise. To praise God. To hear his word and to respond to it with words. Right? That's the logos. So in the beginning was the word. And this is a great word because the word logos means logic, reason, word, speech. Right? It's a big word. And so it has to do with reason. It has to do with abstract thinking, with imagination. But I think it also has to do with speaking. That we were created to speak back to God, to confess dance, to praise, to sing. And again, music, poetry are acts of imagination and creativity. So all of that is sort of wrapped up in this. And I think these are really tools that we've got to bring to bear for Bible reading, but also just to be a full human being is to engage this. All right, let's take a 10-minute break. I want to talk about it as we talk about drunkenness, or the temptation to drunkenness and kind of gluttony with alcohol. But I want us to think about it as actually the gift being a test. Because I think that Holy Communion is a test in two ways. That God actually tests us, first of all, as to the doctrine of the bodily presence. It's a test of faith. I would say John Calvin fails the test. He doesn't believe in the bodily presence. He believes in a real presence, a spiritual presence. He doesn't believe in the bodily presence. And I think it's actually a test of faith. And the second test of faith is perhaps the more difficult one. And that is actually the requirement to fence the altar. And to actually, that is to close the altar and to not make it an act of hospitality for the world. Because that is sort of the temptation. And so, but before we get there, so I want to get there today for sure, and help us frame a little bit and think about the sort of challenge and opportunity that closed communion and the bodily presence are. And I want us to start, though, by thinking about alcohol and the kind of gift that it is and the sort of test that it is, that we would use it appropriately, moderately, right, with the purposes for which it was instituted by God. And then that, of course, is going to also require us to think a little bit, I think, about also the marriage bed, right? Which is the reason I use that particular language from the wedding rite. The purposes for which it was instituted by God, right, is how we describe fully married in the marriage rite. And it's important. So all of these things are really kind of interconnected. So what do we mean by a test of faith? We're really talking here about, again, filial love. I didn't talk about filial love yet yesterday. Okay, I did hint at it. The difference between, not love, I mean fear. The filial fear and the servile fear of the Lord. So we did bring this up a little bit yesterday when we talked about the introduction to the Ten Commandments. I am the Lord your God who has brought you out of the land of bondage, right? And then the Ten Commandments are rules for sons, not for slaves, right? I brought you out of slavery. You're not to be slaves, you're to be sons. Sons desire their father's praise or respect, right? And the way they get that is by being virtuous, by following the rules, and by the willingness to suffer in obedience for what is good. So the fathers will, in fact, test their sons. That's different than tempting them. So a test, in this way, the way that a father tests his son, or that God tests us, is not a setup to see if you are good enough. It is actually an opportunity to be good enough and a training to be better that he endures with you. So, this is my favorite illustration of this. When we talk about third use of the law, right, that is the guide that God gives us the law to show us what is good, what we love, how the world is ordered, right, in the good place. So here is what it is like. The father takes his son out into the woods with him in the wintertime to chop wood. The son wants to be like his father. He wants to be just as tall, just as strong, just as accurate with the axe, just as efficient in how he carries things. He wants to be like his dad. He admires his dad, and he wants to be like him. And the dad includes the son and brings him with him. But of course, the son is not as good as the dad. I mean, I'm thinking here of a 9 or 10-year-old boy, right? But he's thrilled to be with his dad. He loves his dad's attention, and he listens closely to his dad's instruction. And they chop wood. And as they're doing it, it's fine in the beginning, But the son's not as good at it, and he becomes either frustrated, or he becomes cold or tired, and he wants to quit, or he wants to start goofing around. And the father rebukes the son, right? And causes him to come back and says, no, this is what we're doing. We're here to do this. We got a job to do. This is real work. We actually need this wood to heat the house. So we need this kindling, right? And so he puts the boy back on task. The boy resets himself, and he does it. And then they go back to the house with the wood. And the father has, of course, done more than the boy. But the boy's contributions matter. They're not left in the woods. It's brought back. And it's put to use for the good of the family. This is what the third use of the law is. This is how God deals with us as sons and what we're like. And the father takes the son, he's testing the son. How much wood can he chop? Right? How long can he stay on task? Does he do it well? Or does he do it partially? Right? And insofar as he doesn't, the father corrects and rebukes and trains him and makes him better and stronger along the way. Right? At no point is there the danger that the father's going to go, well, you failed this test, you're not my son, I don't love you, stay here in the woods. Right? That's not even the point. The son is afraid of the father. Right? But he's not afraid that his father will hate him or kill him or abandon him. The only thing he's really afraid of is that his father won't respect him. Right? He fears disappointing his father. He doesn't want to do that. But if he does disappoint his father, right? Let's say he loses focus and he starts goofing off or whatever, right? And then he gets the rebuke, then there's a sadness that comes with that. But how does the boy respond to that sadness? And where does he seek comfort? From his father. Right? So I mean, you see this with children all the time. And we see it as grandparents. It's really, I mean, the things you see as grandparents are amazing. It's such a different perspective. And it's hilarious, like, this toddler who's just a tyrant, right? And just being a beast and a totally, right, monster, right? She gets yelled at by her mother and starts bawling. And she runs to her mother for comfort. The same person that scolded her. Not to me, right? I'm there ready. She doesn't want me. She wants the mother that scolded her. That is our relationship to our Heavenly Father in Christ Jesus. It's a secure position, right? So when we talk about it as fear, there's fear. There's the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. But it's filial fear. It's a secure fear. It's not a fear of abandonment, destruction, punishment, hatred. And when we do suffer that disappointment and have to be corrected and rebuked, we seek comfort in that from the very person that scolded us and rebuked us. Confident that he is ready and willing to give it as he always has been in the past. Does that make sense? It's a beautiful, joyous reality, right? And what do we want then, right? So we get rebuked, we get corrected. Okay, quit goofing around. We're here to chop wood. You want to be a man, act like a man. We get the rebuke. We have the sadness. We go to him for comfort. But now what do we want to do? We want to live up to it and try again. Right? It's not a test. So that's how we're tested. And the testing that God puts us through then actually strengthens us. It strengthens the bond that we have with him. Right? Because it proves his love and affection for us and increases our trust. It strengthens that. And of course, it's also, we're growing in the fear and the knowledge of the Lord. It's such a beautiful, beautiful and joyous thing to be part of this. And it is a position of respect. So we said, what do sons want from their fathers? Respect. This is the weirdest thing. It sounds even weird to say it out loud. But God actually respects you. Like he thinks you're capable of, not just thinks, he knows you're capable of these things. He knows who you are, what you are, and he loves you, and he wants you to be your best, and he loves to see you succeed, and he is working you through this, right? He knows what he's doing. I mean, it doesn't seem like it, because we just think we're more clever than he this, but he is actually working this. And none of this is happening on accident, right? Even these crosses that you have to bear. So that's the sort of testing that goes on. And some of the places then to sort of think about this or look about this. Oh yeah, so the tests often come in the gifts, right? So alcohol is this beautiful gift. We looked at some of that yesterday, how the Bible expects it to be for the fullness of humanity, that we would enjoy alcohol and use it, that we'd have this abundance of it. But then there is in it this inherent danger, sort of to invoke the pagans, kind of Pandora's box, right? I mean, alcohol is hugely dangerous and is so easily abused. And it is actually an opportunity for moderation and to have this in accordance with how God uses it. So the Bible has a lot to say. I'm sorry, I tried to print this at the hotel, but the printer kept jamming, so I'm just doing this like this. Sorry. Here's some of these passages. Genesis, whoops, that's the wrong section. Where are these? Here we go. All right, Deuteronomy 21. And they shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. So notice this description. This is great because it's got all of it in there, right? So the son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey. And the evidence of his disobedience is he's a glutton and a drunkard. Often paired together. Drunkenness is kind of a gluttony of wine, right? Or of alcohol. Isaiah 55, woe to those who rise early in the morning, that they may follow intoxicating drink, who continue until night, till wine inflames them. The harp and the strings, the tambourine and the flute, and wine are in their feasts, but they do not regard the work of the Lord, nor consider the operation of his hands. Right? They're simply living for pleasure. I mean, this is probably, maybe this is unfair, but it seems to me so exaggerated in our day, like never before in the history of the world, that we are a people so addicted to pleasure and to maximizing pleasure at every turn, right? Like the grandchildren are really obnoxious with this, right? Like, it is just crazy to me how our grandchildren will stand in our kitchen and they are hungry, starving to hear them talk about it, but their hunger can only be satisfied by the most delicious of things, right? Oh, we can't have that macaroni and cheese. That's not my favorite, right? The only thing that will satisfy them is their favorite, right? I mean, it's just outrageous in a way. And of course, they are worse with us because we will do anything they say to our shame. So, right, they know that. But there is that kind of, we've all sort of felt that urge, right? Just think about looking at a restaurant menu and the sort of choices that are there before you, and just being nervous that you won't have the most delicious thing on the menu. That is ridiculous, right? Why does everything have to be maximized all of the time? It's actually not good for us. We have this problem just ingrained because the Bible talks about feasting. And the problem is we don't know what feasting is because it's all we do. And we just have been desensitized because we haven't done any fasting. Right? And I bring this up just about every year, kind of like at Thanksgiving. You can have, it's not that unusual in our circles, where during Thanksgiving week, Thanksgiving dinner might not actually even be the most delicious meal of the week. Because we just eat so much all the time at such a high level, right? We are so incredibly spoiled. The kind of foods that we eat, King David never had anything. Napoleon, people just, the kings of the world did not eat like we do, right? It's just crazy. For one thing, now of course it's summertime, but, we're eating relatively fresh fruits and vegetables right through the winter, from Argentina. I mean, that's insane. The kind of supply chain, the complexity of that, the ability to get that stuff. You just didn't get that. I don't care if you're the richest man in the world. There was no way to get it, right? Because it takes too long, and so forth. So anyway, this gluttony is a problem because we've been desensitized. It's the same thing, and of course I'm big on this, and I know I'm just preaching to the choir, but I mean the internet is the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity since the fall. It just really is. I mean, of course we can't escape it. It's a reality. We have to live in this world. I get that. But we do need to be conscious of this, and we do need to have some discipline regarding it, because we are being desensitized so fast to so much and trivialized. Have you all heard, at least in the book by Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death?
Yeah.
I mean, it's 30 years old at this point. It's an old book. It's still prophetic. And he's just, the title of it's great. And really, the two dystopian novels of the 20th century, the two great English dystopian novels, of course, are 1984 by George Orwell and Brave New World. Is that Aldous Huxley?
Yes. Aldous Huxley, yes.
Of those two, right, 1984 is a more fun read because it's anti-communist and anti-kind of fascist, right? And very easy to sort of see through. But Brave New World is the real world that we're living in. So if you haven't read Brave New World, more people have read 1984 than Brave New World. If you haven't read Brave New World, you should read that. It will break your heart. Because basically the difference is, in Brave New World, the government kind of controls everybody by a kind of utopian intoxication, right? Just by pleasure, right? And that's what we're at. Just amuse them to death, right? Distract them from anything that matters. And Postman is not a Christian. Well, definitely not now. But anyway, he was not a Christian, but he was a prophetic. He saw how this was going. And I think for me, one of the most important things that I learned in that book, which was shocking to me, was how actually the news, and this was a long time ago, now it's more obvious, but that the news is fake. And I'm talking Walter Cronkite news of the 1950s, not or 60s. I'm not talking about the latest stuff. The truth, so I think of this all the time because my father was one of these guys that read a couple of newspapers a day and watched the evening news daily, religiously. And he did that because he was an American. And he was a good citizen. And a good citizen is an informed citizen. And, may he rest in peace. He was a great man in lots of ways, but he wasn't perfect, obviously. But he was foolish on that. He was wrong. He was not informed. He thought he was being informed. He was just being entertained. Because what was on the evening news then and now was trivia. And I say that because it was. Why was it trivia? Because, look, let's just say he's glued to the television during the Bay of Pigs invasion. It's not that what he was being told was necessarily false, that it was inaccurate. It wasn't at all actionable. What is he going to do with that information? It's not usable. It's not his world. But it was made to feel like it was his world. It was made to feel like he was getting educated, like he knew something at the end. But all he knew was he might as well know, the batting average of the New York Yankees in 1958. I mean, okay, but it's just trivia. It's not actually something he could use to serve his family, to serve his neighbor, to better himself, to actually enrich himself for the world. It felt like it, though. Does that make sense? And this is, if that was trivia, my goodness, how far we've come from, actually world events and so forth. So, Postman says in that book, he wrote it in like 1985, I think, maybe earlier. What he says is, the only thing on the evening news that is actually real information is the weather report. It's the only thing that actually impacts, so it's like you can actually respond to it. It's meaningful for your life. You'd be far better off, and I know this just sounds like, oh, that's the pastor talking, but you'd be far better off reading the Bible than listening to news. But you could also say, I would say, you would even be, I think, far better off reading a novel, listening to a piece of music, right, than the news. So trying to make that distinction and recognize where we're giving our attention, what we're devoting our minds to, what's coloring us. Because what comes into you changes you. You are not immune to the influences of this world. And they are always influencing you. And now, more than ever with the internet, they're always selling you something. They need your clicks, right? You've heard this, it's true. You are the product. You are what is being sold. And your attention is kind of the economy and so forth. So that is just hard to get away from. Now, mindfulness stuff kind of helps with that a little bit, right? This ability to focus and to think. But there's a gluttony of the eyes. The other thing Postman is really, and this goes along with this gluttony thing. Postman was Jewish, and he sees the problem with, so the book Amusing Ourselves to Death is against television, not against the internet. It's so much, because it's old, it's so much more true of the internet. But he makes this giant point, which I never thought of before, about the second commandment. I'm sorry, the first commandment with the graven images. And he says, the true God must be worshipped with words, not with images. And we have to use words. If you have words, then you have to use your imagination. Right? And so television robs you of your imagination because it shows you pictures so that you don't have to use this. Well, the internet's just 4,000 times worse, right? And it's just image-based all the time. Colors, flashing, changing. It's horrible. So, okay, so that's our disobedient sons. More. Woe to men mighty at drinking wine. Woe to men valiant for mixing intoxicating drink. Isaiah 52. We have to also, of course he's mocking this, right? Like there's any strength in getting drunk. Woe to the man who's mighty in drinking. However, we talk that way. We joke about this. That is a danger. That I've engaged in this myself, right? Laughing about intoxication or about drinking too much or, right? We do it all the time. It's always this kind of joking sort of thing that's impious and dangerous. Sets a bad example for the boys, right? For the younger men. But it's also, it's just inappropriate at every level. We need to speak with respect. The way that we speak about the marriage bed and the way that we speak about alcohol ought to be almost exactly the same. We should not make vulgar jokes as though it's fine to get drunk. I think that country music in general is superior to pop music and rock music because I think it has slightly more nuance. I think that like rock music, I'll say, I think that rap music actually has the ability to express anger quite well. I think that's about it. I think rock music can express anger and eroticism pretty well. And that's about it. I think country music can express nostalgia and kind of sentimentality. It's a little bit broader. So that makes it slightly superior, I think, in terms of what it can talk about in a way that's sort of meaningful. But in the end, of course, it's also pop music and it's pretty shallow. What's that? It can be a little more real because we're not just angry all the time. Yeah. And it's more story-based.
And I think we can say no to it when you should.
Yeah. There is, though, in country music, a certain drunkenness that gets celebrated. That is, and of course, sometimes also fornication, which of course is in all of them. And all of that, of course, also rap music and rock music. But it is unfortunate the sort of celebration of drunkenness that country music often has. So, I mean, that's the problem with any kind of popular music in a sense. It is going to be vulgar, so that's the reality. That is the kind of, I mean, you do have this advantage if you get to art music, you know, whether we're talking classical music or church music. Church music especially, right, has a much broader emotional capacity, right? I mean, there's some anger in Bach's, you know, Passion for Good Friday. You know, he can express anger. So he can express everything that rock music can, but he also can express a kind of joy that is pure and free of kind of sentimentality in a way. And yeah, joy and praise and tenderness, right? That I think is lacking in those other forms. I don't know what, anyway, the celebrating of drunkenness, we got to watch that. You're not mighty at drinking, you're weak, right? It's the same thing with anger. My favorite kind of superhero guy, comic book character, is the Hulk for this reason. I love the Hulk because it's such a pure, adolescent, masculine fantasy. And that is that I'm angry, and my anger ought to be felt by the whole world, and they ought to quake in fear of it, right? That my anger is going to be strong and mighty and unstoppable. That's the whole fantasy. And I bet girls have felt like this too, but boys really feel like this, especially teenage boys. I mean, boys are different, you know that. They got problems, big problems from about 13 to 20, maybe 40. But, right? That testosterone gets rolling, and it's tough, right? And they just feel this rage. And the Hulk just, man, I think it's just a perfect fantasy embodiment of what they think they look like or ought to look like, right? And of course, the ridiculous thing is that it's the complete opposite reality. That anger actually robs us of rationality and makes us weak, right? I mean, it's the classic thing in boxing. I used to really like boxing. I don't anymore. I think it's a problem. But it's not a problem that I don't like it. It's a problem I ever did. I don't see how really how you can engage in boxing without breaking the fifth commandment. It's not like hockey, where the goal in hockey is supposedly not to hurt the other person. It's just that this other person's in the way, and I mean, he's kind of, that is a difference of intent, though. And with boxing, your goal is actually to hurt the other person physically. I mean, and even maybe giving brain damage, right? I mean, it's pretty violent. But anyway, in boxing, the kind of classic thing is the boxer who gets angry and loses his temper loses. Right? He can't actually fight effectively if he loses his temper. It makes him weaker because he's being ruled by his passions instead of actually acting in a way that is strategically and tactically sound. Right? So when we give into these lusts, whatever they might be, they actually weaken us. And alcohol, the most ridiculous of all. Right? Nobody's made stronger with alcohol. Here we have more. Hosea, for they shall eat but not have enough. They shall commit harlotry but not increase, because they have ceased obeying the Lord. Harlotry, wine, and new wine enslave the heart. And this is strong language, right? So this also has to do with the fact that the passions are never satisfied. That's why they have to be restrained, and why we have to practice fasting and self-denial and discipline, right? Because there's never enough, right? You can be absolutely stuffed. You can be to a fancy Italian restaurant, have the greatest meal of your life. You're so stuffed you can't eat another bite, and then they come out with the cheesecake. Somehow you got room. How is that possible? You just said and swore. We've all done this, right? You eat so much you feel like you're going to throw up, and then they bring out cheesecake or whatever it is. somehow you can squeeze in more? What is wrong with us? Right? It's really, and there's a time for feasting, and hopefully we'll get to some of that, but there's a problem here too, right? And so even in feasting, we have to be careful that we still have some moderation, some self-control, that it's not simply gluttony. Just quickly, one of the things that sets feasting aside from gluttony, or helps to restrain it and control it, is we don't do it alone. Feasting is a communal sharing of riches and joyously together. And that's one of the distinctions. It's also seasonal, it's not daily, right? And it should also, while it can be rich and joyous, it still does need to be restrained in the sense that it doesn't become an idol, right? It's done in thanksgiving and in community. In our church, we have a number of rules. They're not like written down, but we do repeat them repeatedly for alcohol. So we have alcohol at basically every event that we're doing. We actually have kegs in the church basement with 8 taps. I'm dead serious. We do it. We have for years. And so we talk about it a lot. What are these? How do we handle it? How do we police ourselves? Right? And so, of course, no inebriation. Nobody should get drunk, ever, and certainly not here. Right? Second, obviously, no underage drinking. Right? And no social pressure. And then so you want to have a glass of water, great. We're not pressuring or even, in a sense, even encouraging you to drink. It's perfectly acceptable, and you shouldn't feel awkward or out of place in that way. And then everyone is his brother's keeper. So if anyone says, that's enough, that's enough. If anyone says, have a glass of water, you're having a glass of water. No questions asked. Even if all you've been drinking is water, and they say, I think you need a glass of water. The rule is I'm going to have a glass of water, because I can always have a glass of water, right, without giving offense and problems. And of course that isn't happening. So we talk about this, and the other thing with this is, even outside of church events, our advice is, on the whole and for the most part, never drink alone. That alcohol should almost always be partaken as part of a feast. Even if it's not a full-blown Thanksgiving dinner, if it's just your buddy, if you're out on the lake fishing and you have a beer with your buddy, it's a kind of feast that ought to be received as a gift. Not necessary for the sustenance of life, right? Not I'm starving or I'm dehydrated, but I'm enjoying this company and this day and this gift from God. So communal. Don't drink alone. Don't drink daily. And then, the final rule of this is, because I am just, in the old days, the Lutherans used to always be really bad about this. I think they still are. And that is, the Lutherans don't like to make rules. And I never like to make rules. Oh, we'll just appeal to the gospel. Well, I'm done with that. I make rules. And I like numbers. I don't want to be legalistic about it, but people need guidance. We can't leave this vague. So I just tell them, you know what? Nobody ever needs more than 2 drinks. The hilarious thing is, I actually got this from Matt Petersen of all people. He said this, that's a great line. He said, 2 drinks is just the right amount. 3 drinks is never enough. And that is exactly, in my own experience, kind of the way it goes, right? 2 drinks feels great, you're having a great time, everything's happy. Feels like one more would be great, but then what happens is it spirals kind of quickly, right? So, look, I'm not making hard rules. I'm not, different body compositions, different how much weight, whatever. I don't want to, but it's a guideline, right? At least if we say 2 drinks, we know 4 is twice as many, right? So it gives you something there, and I think we need that, and I think we need the community support. So that we can have this kind of moderation and this kind of recognizing the danger and the risk in it. All right, I want to get to there's so much. I love so much. Let me read you a couple of my favorite parts of these. Here is, I want to do that one too. But I wanted the Proverbs description of being drunk. Oh, here it is, Proverbs 23. I wish I would have, I forgot I can make this bigger. Oh, that's so much better. Okay. Proverbs 25, you've probably heard this. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who linger long at the wine. Those who go in search of mixed wine. Do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. At the last it bites like a serpent and stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. Yes, you will be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, or like one who lies at the top of the mast, saying, They have struck me, but I was not hurt. They have beaten me, but I did not feel it. When shall I awake that I may seek another drink? That's a great description of being hungover, right? Who has all these problems? The guy that got drunk last night, right? And the guy who's looking to get drunk again. And the guy who last night was so stupid, he couldn't even feel his own body that he thought he was fine if he got beaten, right? So it's a great description. And then I have this from Sirach, from the Apocrypha. The Lutherans did use the Apocrypha in the old days. Luther was very familiar with it. The early Bibles printed in America from Concordia Publishing House had the Apocrypha in it. And we dropped that basically because of American Protestantism. We never accepted it as the Bible, but we always accepted it as great and important literature from the history of the church that contained much wisdom and a few really weird things. There are a few really weird things. So, it's obviously not the Bible, but there's a lot of great stuff. The story of Susanna, there's all kinds of Tobit, there's a lot of great stuff. Well, this is a great thing, and the wisdom of Sirach is quite good. So this is chapter 31. Do not try to prove your strength by wine drinking, for wine has destroyed many. As the furnace tests the work of the smith, so wine tests hearts when the insolent quarrel. Wine is very life to human beings if taken in moderation. What is life to one who is without wine? It has been created to make people happy. Wine drunk at the proper time and in moderation is rejoicing of heart and gladness of soul. Wine drunk to excess leads to bitterness of spirit, to quarrels and stumbling. Drunkenness increases the anger of the fool to his own hurt, reducing his strength and adding wounds. Do not reprove your neighbor at a banquet of wine, and do not despise him in his merrymaking. Speak no word of reproach to him, and do not distress him by making demands of him. So, it's not exactly shocking advice, but he does recognize the goodness of wine. Who has a full life without wine, he says. But don't drink it to excess, instead in moderation. All this to really say that in giving us this great gift, God is testing us. He wants us to learn and to demonstrate our ability to control ourselves and to receive this in moderation in the purposes for which it was instituted. One of those purposes is the Lord's Supper. It's not the only purpose, but it's a related purpose, right? And the Lord's Supper itself, I think it's so beautiful that the Lord's Supper is made with, or is presented to us in, a dangerous substance. It is. Alcohol requires respect. If you're going to put kegs in your church basement, you have to have rules. Right? The easy thing is to not have them, in a sense. So, it is a dangerous substance. It has to be treated with respect. We should not make jokes about getting drunk, right? Or act as though, I think we've also got to be careful, even in how we consume it, that, I can remember this back to the Army stuff. I've never been a smoker. Thank God. I was spared that. But I remember these guys smoking, and they made it look so good. I mean, it looks right, because you'd be, oh, smoke break, and, you're whatever, you're tired, you're hot, you get to sit down and smoke, and this guy's smoking. I mean, the ecstasy that they got from this, it made it seem attractive, right? If that's how you treat alcohol, if you act like alcohol is this great kind of thing, of course your boys are going to be attracted to it, right? If you talk about it, like if you have to have it, in these kinds of things, you're setting up a dangerous culture for kind of the young people, right? So we've got to learn how to do this appropriately and in the right thing. And I don't think it's even optional. I mean, again, because I think this does have to do with the fullness of life and what God has given and what He wants for us. There are some other times, so we're right at, well, actually, we started at like quarter after.
Yeah, just keep.
So we can, okay, I wanted to talk a little bit, again, now, besides just moderation, there's lots in the Bible, don't get drunk. And I know it seems obvious, but I think we've just got to be clear about it. But there are some other times when you might abstain in the Bible. So, Leviticus chapter 10. Do not drink wine or intoxicating drink, you nor your sons with you, when you go into the tabernacle of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. Isn't that interesting? So, our church is in a city, and I have had people come to the communion now on Sunday morning with alcohol on their breath. Probably doesn't happen up here. Well, if it does happen up here, it's probably hidden well. I won't commune a person. I'm not going to give Holy Communion to a person who comes to the altar having already had whatever. I think it's completely inappropriate, right? I mean, I don't think that's shocking to you. But the point would be, there are times when we have to abstain for the sake of reverence, right? I find it offensive, maybe I'm overreacting, but I think it's irreverent for the groomsmen and the groom to be doing shots before the wedding, and then acting as though he has to steal up his nerves for this, right? It's inappropriate. Right? This is holy marriage. You should be entering this soberly, right? And deliberately and joyfully, not acting like you need to be drunk to do it. And I think that kind of joke is an abuse of alcohol and is irreverent to holy marriage. But it's pretty common, right? I think, there's times when we should abstain. And for the sake of this, right? So that's a very explicit one. But you've got, again, in Ezekiel, no priest shall drink wine when he enters into the inner court. Alcoholic pastors, I mean, this is offensive, obviously. This is an offense. In fact, in the qualifications for a bishop in 1 Timothy, right, not a drunkard, right? That is on the list. And of course, I always like to point out on the table of duties, I love the table of duties. The table of duties are hilarious because they're completely universal. Everything that is said that is required for a bishop is required for Christians, right? It's not like you guys get to be the husband of more than one wife. You guys get to be drunkards. You guys get to be, sluggards, or what's the word there? Striker in the King James, right? You don't get to be any of those things. The pastors are held, it's the same standard, just to a different degree. It's not like the standards for pastors are different. They're the same, it's just to a different degree. Nobody's supposed to be. Christians aren't supposed to get drunk, right? The same thing goes for, right, whatever is said of the rulers, right, in Romans 13, this is just true of anybody that exercises authority, which everybody does, right, within your vocations. So they're not as though, I don't need to listen to that part because it doesn't apply to me. So if the priest isn't supposed to get drunk when he enters into the inner court, or not supposed to, it doesn't say get drunk, not supposed to drink wine. Number 6, again, he shall separate himself from wine and similar drink. He shall drink neither vinegar made from wine, nor vinegar made from similar drink. Neither shall he drink any grape juice. I don't know what that word is, that's interesting. Nor eat fresh grapes or raisins. We've got more here. Most of these have to do with the priests. But I want to get here in Proverbs. It is not for the kings, O Lemuel, it is not for the kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink. Right? So, I think in a way, we can take this and say, when you have a duty that requires judgment and discernment and wisdom, right? If you're the referee at the high school volleyball game, nobody wants you drinking before that, right? So you have to take your vocation seriously, and there are times when you might have to abstain, and I think it makes the most sense to abstain completely, right? Just to give no appearance of impropriety or danger. Here, Daniel, remember? I ate no pleasant food, nor meat or wine come into my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all till 3 weeks were fulfilled. Daniel drinks wine in the book of Daniel, but not the wine that Nebuchadnezzar sends, right? So there is something there, I think, of close communion, of fellowship, of receiving this particular gift. And why is that? It's a funny thing that so people, I've got so much bourbon at my house. You guys, if you saw all the bourbon I have, because people found out I like bourbon. My kids found out they give me some bourbon. We can't, it's insane. How am I going to drink all this bourbon, right? Because that's the problem, as you know, with adult children. They have no idea what to give you for a gift. They want to give you a gift, so they just give you the one dumb thing they think you like that you don't really want. Right? That's how it works. So, I got all this bourbon. I can't drink all this bourbon. I finally quit giving me bourbon. But what is this about? It is funny that to give somebody a bottle of booze, right, is a kind of sign of, right? Nobody's ever given me a gallon of milk. I drink a lot of milk. Why don't they give me a gallon of milk? Right? It's not the right gift. There is something in this that is recognized by us as a kind of fellowship and a kind of intimacy that alcohol, in fact, gives. So back to the kegs at church. I actually do think this was a great idea. I'll try to tell the story quick. I did not want the kegs. I had at the time, there was another pastor there serving with me, and he wanted them. And we were every time, we always had alcohol at church events because the guys would bring a six-pack. So every elders meeting, there was always a six-pack. It was very nice, and it was enjoyable, and we all liked it. And the other pastor there was a big beer connoisseur guy. He loves beer, so he had a little kegerator thing. And he would sometimes bring it to church. It was a big hassle. Haul this, it's a little mini refrigerator. He'd bring this thing to church for some event, and we'd have it there, and it was fine. And then he'd take it home. And he said, we need one here at church. We don't need one of those at church. Why? We just bring a six-pack. It's easy. And he was just insistent. So anyway, I let him have his way. Go ahead. We had a little extra money from something. He buys this, 2-tap, mini refrigerator cabinet. And within, 3 or 4 months, I had to tell him, that thing's not big enough. Go get more. So now we have 8 taps. And so I totally did not see it coming. Now what is the difference? It's surprising to me, but it's real. Here's the difference. First of all, by adding alcohol to a church potluck becomes a feast. I'm dead serious. It has a celebratory nature. It changes the atmosphere in a way that's positive. It has the potential to go bad, but it doesn't have to. That's what it's done for us. And so that was amazing. Well, why does that work with a keg and not with a six-pack? It's taken me a long time to figure this out. And maybe I still haven't. Maybe there's some mystery here. But some of it, I think, is actually because it's communal. There is something that is joyous about all drinking from the same thing. I don't know why. I don't know why it matters, but it does. The quality of the beer is a little bit better, right? It's fresher, okay, maybe that. But I think there's something about gathering there. I think there's something about the pouring. and I think there's something about sharing. I think it's maybe a little bit like the difference between receiving Holy Communion from a chalice or from an individual cup. I really do. There's a communal festive attitude to it that just elevates the thing. But I think there's something going on with why do we give alcohol as a gift? Why is it appropriate to give? I would honestly enjoy milk more. And it would be more useful, but nobody's ever given me yellow milk. Probably never will. Right? It just doesn't have that kind of luxury idea behind it. Right? Yeah. All right. So anyway, that's why then it's interesting that Daniel refuses it. When he's offered that gift from Nebuchadnezzar, it's inappropriate and he won't take it. And maybe we should think about that. Maybe there are gifts we should refuse. You know? I mean, what if an alcoholic, what if a guy that you know has a problem with alcohol gives you a bottle of booze? I've thought, this has happened to me. Should I, I've just taken it. But I don't really want him to keep it. But I have felt dirty by that. Like I was somehow participating. Like by my receiving this bottle of booze from him, who clearly has a problem and shouldn't be going into a liquor store. At least in my mind. Now I receive this from him, I feel like I've condoned his activities. I think I have. So, well, there's Daniel. And then, of course, the great example of this is Jesus himself, who will not drink the wine that is mixed with gall. Right? On the cross. He refuses it. There, of course, because he will not allow himself to be numbed to any of the pain. Maybe also, though, that's, I think, the primary reality. Right? He's not looking for relief. He's going to carry the burden all the way there. But I wonder also if what he's being offered is false mercy. I don't think the Missouri Synode's going to be able to handle this, but I'm going to tell you what I think anyway. I think that we should condemn marijuana use. I don't think we have the capacity as a synod to do it. And we don't because some shameful reasons, but some of the problem is there just isn't a clear Bible passage that says marijuana is a sin. The problem is, I think there's a number of problems with marijuana that are hard for us to deal with, and then they're just kind of cultural pressure. I don't think it's possible, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think it's possible to use marijuana without the intent of inebriation. There is no, social smoking of marijuana. Like, the whole point of smoking marijuana or eating gummies is to be drunk on it. So I don't think that there is actually I'm not talking about, I guess, if there was a legitimate medical prescription and application of this, which I'm not sure there is. But, if it was I'm not against, morphine being used by, in a hospital situation. So if it was something akin to that with marijuana, okay. But we know that's not what's coming out with marijuana in these medical things. I think it's being used to get drunk, high, whatever. It's possible also, I don't have a Bible passage for this either. We know drunkenness is wrong. We know to lose control, right, is wrong, and it actually, to be intoxicated in this way, opens us up to demonic attacks, right, and makes it hard to serve our neighbor and to be ready. I've thought about this multiple times as a pastor, right? If I have too much to drink, which I have many times, to my shame, if I have too much to drink on a Friday night, and every pastor talks about this, and then somebody calls me, hey, come over, Mildred's dying, and I'm going to say, this has never happened to me so far, thank God. I can't come, I can't drive. That'd be pretty hard to live with, right? There is a vocational duty to be ready, right, and to be prepared, and we all have that. I mean, but again, with marijuana, I just don't know how you do that. I'm also not sure that being high is an exact equivalent of being drunk. Because it is a different sort of chemical reality in your body. It's not a depressant, or whatever the word is. I'm talking beyond my knowledge here. Right, but it's a hallucinogen. And that seems to me very problematic. Historically, marijuana was used by pagans for spiritual experiences, and it's pretty risky. So I think we need to warn the church to not get engaged in this. It's not legal in Indiana. We're far morally superior to Minnesota. Probably going to be legal in the next 6 months. It's heartbreaking, but I just think. And I actually thought it would happen quicker. When it was legalized in Colorado, I thought it's going to sweep across the country within a few years, and it hasn't been as quick as I thought, but it seems like it's coming. So, because Kentucky's supposed to be more conservative than us, and they got it. We're surrounded by it. Every state has it. I don't know which states don't anymore. So, I think it's wrong. I don't think the Missouri Synod is going to be able to come up with a theological rationale and explanation for it. We're going to be silent on it. And that's going to make me mad, but I understood. It's frustrating. It's frustrating that the Synod can't speak on these issues that it should be able to speak to. I think the Missouri Synod should have been able, I think during the George Floyd riots, I think it should have been easy for the Missouri Synod to support the police. I think that should have been a no-brainer. We are law-abiding people. Thank God for the police and the work that we're doing. We're against corrupt police. We hate police brutality and police abuse. But on the whole and for the most part, we are God-fearing, law-abiding people, and we support the police. How hard is that for a Christian to say? We couldn't say it. We could not say it. We just did not have the moral courage to say that in the political climate of those days. Maybe that's unfair of me to say that, but I don't think it is. I think I'm being honest. And I think we're in a similar kind of situation with some of these other things. Yes, sir?
Often in the prayers, I'm praying, Lord, protect our country, president, give them wisdom to govern, protect those who protect us here at home, far away places. That's often prayer.
Beautiful. Yeah, of course it is. Romans 13, right? In fact, when that George Floyd stuff was going on, what was the Synod pounding us with? Romans 13, wear your masks, obey the government, right? And, so on one side, we're being told, and then this happens, and then, well, how about we say, honor the, well, that's a little different. That was disappointing to me. And it was a hard time, and everybody made mistakes. I get it. I'm not above reproach. But I would like to learn lessons from it so that we don't just keep making the same mistakes. The fact that people made mistakes and nobody was perfect doesn't mean then that the best procedure would be to ignore things and just keep doing the same things. I would love, this is sort of like the closed communion discussion yesterday, I would love to have a forum where we would talk about these things and go, what did you do? What did I do? What was wrong about it? What would I do different? At least I tried to get us to say, us being the CTCR, it didn't go anywhere, but nobody wants to say anything about COVID. We're terrified to say anything about COVID because we might hurt somebody's feelings who made mistakes during COVID. I'm not out to hurt people's feelings, but how are we going to learn anything? So anyway, one thing that's very clear in hindsight, if it wasn't clear then, is that churches that cancel worship services have declined. And so we know there was a correspondence. If you canceled your worship services, what that did to your long-term sustainability as a congregation, right? 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, it's down. Well, can't we just at least say that? Can't we say, okay, you guys canceled worship service, you closed all your worship services because of COVID, and you thought it was the right thing out of love for your neighbor and obedience to the government. You did it for all the right reasons, though it all turns out it didn't, right? But can't we at least say that it had this consequence, and canceling your worship services is detrimental to the life of the church and to your congregation, so that people would know it if this happens again? No, that might make them sad, because they made a mistake.
Ever at that time,
Yeah,
church,
absolutely.
we did.
We did. We did. Okay, let's take a break. Sorry. I think we got through it close enough.
We'll probably do lunch. We'll take 15-minute break.